be able to do to show that they're meeting this standard. And this is really the reason why the nation went to WIDA, because the idea is that we need to make sure that students, even second language learners, English language learners, are still being asked to reach high levels of cognition. Just the way that they're going to demonstrate that is going to be different. And one of the things I should probably say here, and would say if I were doing a standard lecture, is that WIDA stands for World-Class Instructional Design and Assessment. And it was originally created for second language learners or English language learners. One of the reasons why I like to use this is because, as we've talked about in class, anybody could be an English language learner at any time if they aren't familiar with the content of your class. And this gives us a nice, clear way to look at how to scaffold assignments to meet the needs of a variety of learners. So the cognitive function is that overarching students will be able to do what? Okay. The next piece here is the domain. And in this one, it shows that the domain is writing. And when I go back through some of the other documents, this will become more clear. But the two domains we are going to be working in are writing and speaking. And these are considered productive domains because they require us to produce language. So we're going to be looking at writing and speaking because the reading domain actually is very specific about teaching students how to read. And really what we want to do is, in this class, we're looking at more reading to learn and how do we help them read to learn in our contents. And the writing and speaking would be our methods of showing that they understood what they read. So we're working in the writing domain, so everything in here should have to do with writing. Now, the next piece is model performance indicator, and these are our model performance indicators for level 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And the model performance indicators are basically things that indicate that they are able to perform this task. And so it's made up of 3 different parts, and I'm just going to highlight these here. We have the language function, we have the content stem, and we have an instructional support. And the language function, content stem, and instructional support are the 3 components of each of these. So when we look at level 1, we have illustrate a simile from a list of pre-selected similes. Illustrate, I didn't get that whole thing, but that's okay. Illustrate is our language function. It's what we're asking them to do with the language. A simile is our content stem, and from a list of pre-selected similes is our scaffold. This is our instructional support to help them get it, to help them figure out what is the simile. Okay? And if you look, every single one of these pieces has a language function: identify, create, define, apply. Every single one has a content stem, similes within a short story, a simile comparing and contrasting, simile in their own words, or applying figurative language to their short story. So every single one has a content stem, and then almost all of them have, in this one, all of them have an instructional support. What I ask of you is that at least 4 of them have instructional supports. So a list of pre-selected similes, a worksheet of examples where they select yes or no, from a short story that we read together in class, and this one is using their guided notes, and this one is using examples of simile as a model. And so within each level, these sentences are made up of language function, content stem, instructional support. Okay, and you don't have to guess at these. I'm going to show you where we go to figure out what language function should they be at each level. Content stem is going to be the background you bring. What content are you working on? And then I'm going to show you where's a list of instructional supports that you can find. The next piece is topic-related language, and all this is what vocabulary, what academic vocabulary will they be working with for this particular piece of instruction, this lesson. And so any academic vocabulary is going to go here. So I'm going to minimize this and show you now how you go about writing these model performance indicators. do this, the first thing you're going to want to look at is can-do descriptors. And the reason we look at the can-do descriptors is because the can-do descriptors help tell us what students can do at each level. And so if you click on this, it's going to ask you to go outside of Blackboard. And I'm just going to go here to 6-8 because that's right in the middle. And open up the can-do descriptors. Now, like I said, the domains we're working in are writing and speaking. And so we're going to scroll down to writing and speaking to look at these. So here, speaking, it says at level 1, students should be able to answer yes or no questions, or begin to use general and high frequency vocabulary, or repeat words and short phrases from memorized chunks. And if you look, this will give you ideas of what students should be able to do at each of these levels. So at level 5, they'll be able to defend a point of view and give reasons, or use and explain similes and metaphors. So like in the example that we saw from language arts, they were actually writing figurative language within their piece. They were using it and explaining their choices. Negotiate meaning in group discussions. And so if you follow this, this is going to help you figure out what language function are they at for each of those levels. And if you scroll down, oops, the Spanish one. If you scroll down, they have the same thing for writing. So within writing, they should be able to draw content-related pictures, or complete pattern sentences, or produce short paragraphs. And one of the things you're going to notice is that what they can do in speaking will come before what they can do in writing. And so these levels aren't going to be the same for each. You need to look. So for example, as you noticed in the speaking, respond to yes or no questions was at level 1. But in writing, it's at level 2 because it takes a little bit more to produce the writing, and that generally develops a little bit more slowly. So can-do descriptors are going to help you figure out the language function. Like I said, you're going to bring the content piece. And if we go back here, then we have another document called, let me close my email, we have another document called Amplified Standards. So if we click on our Amplified Standards here, this document is really helpful. And one of the things that's helpful about it is there are lots of examples in here of completed amplified matrices like we're doing. And so you could go find one for your content area and use that as a model. But generally, I like to start right at page 4 in the document, because all of the components that I just went over, it walks through with you in this document. And so it explains that the connection is the state standard. And the example context for language usage, it gives you the definition for that and a sample of how to create that right here. And like I said, see, this one's significantly shorter than the one we had for language arts. And it gives you the cognitive functions and how where those should fit and how we come up with those. And the different domains and levels and all of those pieces that I just went over. One of the nice pieces about this document, though, is that, I'm just going to keep scrolling down, I'm almost there, is that here, so when we need those supports, those instructional supports, here, the third element of the MPI is the instructional support. Here's some examples of instructional supports. And so I want you to start here figuring out what your examples are. And oh my God, my emails are all blowing up. So I'm going to trash my coupon. And I want you to start here for your examples and pick examples that are from here. And I want you to vary your examples. So all of your examples shouldn't be with partners, in small groups, in a whole group. I want you to think about different ways that you can use these. And these aren't the only supports that are available. I provided lots of examples of lessons in the Blackboard shell for you to look at so that you could see, because they use some that weren't on here. And so you can come up with some other supports, but I think this is the piece that everybody forgets to put in the instructional support, and it's actually the scaffold. This is what makes the learning comprehensible for our students. And so be sure that you're looking at the supports, and that as you're doing the model performance indicators, you're using all 3 components. Okay, you're using the language function, the content, and the support. The next piece that's available for you here is this WIDA overview, and I'm not going to click on it, but this WIDA overview is a tutorial that goes over everything that I'm going over here. And so if this isn't clear to you and you still need help figuring it out, you can click on this link here and watch the tutorial that was created by WIDA to help you work through the project. Okay, so you have lots of resources available. The next piece that I want to go over on this is the backside, the discourse complexity. This is the part that a lot of people get tripped up on. Discourse complexity is literally what you want students or what you expect students to be able to do with the language. And so, since we're working in the writing domain, what this student wrote here is what a student might write. So this would be an example of what he would expect a student to be able to write at this level after having been taught this lesson, okay? So these aren't your ideas. This is what you think a student can produce. So here's an example of what a student might write given practice in this. And what I would suggest is working backwards. So what would your on grade level proficient student be able to produce? And then move backwards to, with scaffolds, what would a student be able to produce? So as you can see, his nose was dripping like a faucet is directly connected to illustrate a simile from a pre-selected list, or a list of pre-selected similes. The next piece down here is language forms and conventions. And I'm totally going to go over this in class because this confuses everybody. And so don't worry too much about this at this point. I'll make sure to cover that in class because I think it helps to do that in an environment where I can talk you through it. And then the last piece is vocabulary usage. And this is just what is the vocabulary or academic vocabulary that might be difficult for students that would need some pre-teaching for them to be able to produce this. Okay, so it's the vocabulary needed to produce this, or the vocabulary used in this. It could be both, all right? So if you come down here, this one's a speaking one, and it's the same thing. Recite a poem of 4 to 7 lines, reading off the paper. So that memorized piece, that using memorized language to create something. And if you look at their levels 1 through 3, they have an example of a poem that's between 4 to 7 lines that uses that academic, or that uses the simile as they're practicing here. One of the things that you do need to know as you do this is your level 1 or your